What if Dale never died by accident, but instead arrived exactly where the town wanted him to arrive? What if that moment in the pool was not a mistake, not a glitch, not bad luck, but the clearest proof that the rules of Fromville were never broken at all? Because in the world of From, every random death starts to feel less random the more you look at it. And Dale's death is the one moment that doesn't just raise questions, it completely changes the meaning of the pool, the trees, and even the idea of escape itself. Dale's decision looked simple on the surface. He went into the faraway tree because he wanted out. He believed that somewhere beyond Fromville, there had to be help. A rescue, a signal, a way to reach the outside world. But he had no coordinates, no map, no instructions. Only one clear intention: escape. And that is where everything changes. Because the faraway trees have never been random. They don't just teleport people. They respond. Every known case shows a pattern. People do not arrive in meaningless places. They arrive somewhere that matches what they carry inside them. Fear leads to hiding places. Survival leads to shelters. Searching leads to answers. And escape leads somewhere else entirely. Dale's destination was not a forest, not a cellar, not a forgotten room. He arrived at the motel pool, a place that should have been part of something larger, but now stands isolated, broken from its original purpose. And the most disturbing detail is not where he arrived, but how. He didn't step out into water. He didn't emerge on the surface. He materialized inside the structure itself, trapped within solid concrete, as if the destination existed, but the passage into it was no longer open. This is where most interpretations stop. They assume the tree malfunctioned, that Dale was unlucky, that the system failed. But there is a stronger possibility. What if the system didn't fail at all? What if it delivered him exactly to the correct exit point, and the exit simply no longer functioned? Because the pool is not just a location in Fromville. It is a symbol that appears again and again without explanation. A drained structure beside a motel sign that no longer has a motel. A place that feels important but incomplete, like something essential has been removed from it. Dale's death forces a reevaluation of everything we think we understand about movement in this town. If the faraway trees respond to intention, then Dale's strongest intention was not survival inside Fromville, but escape from it. And so the system may have done exactly what it always does. It followed the intention. It took him to the exit. And the exit, for reasons still buried in the history of the town, was no longer open. This turns Dale's death from an accident into something far more unsettling. Not a failure of the system, but a confirmation that the system still works perfectly. And if that is true, then the real question is no longer, why did Dale die? The real question is, what exactly is the pool, and what did it used to be before it became empty? The moment Dale's body was discovered inside the structure, something about the pool stopped feeling like background detail and started feeling like evidence. In the world of From, nothing is placed without meaning, and nothing stays unchanged unless something forces it to change. The motel sign standing beside the empty pool is one of those details that never receives attention from the characters, yet it never disappears from view. It has been there since the earliest days of the town, long before anyone started asking the right questions. A broken marker pointing to something that is no longer visible. A motel that does not exist anymore. A pool that holds no water. And a sign that still insists both once mattered. At first glance, it feels like decay, like abandonment. But the deeper pattern of Fromville suggests something else entirely. This is not just a forgotten place. It is a repurposed one. The town does not erase things. It transforms them. Every structure in Fromville seems to carry layered history, like different versions of reality stacked on top of each other. Buildings shift meaning depending on who is looking at them, and more importantly, depending on what cycle the town is currently in. The pool, then, may not be an empty recreational feature at all. It may be the remains of something older, something functional that has lost its visible form. Because water in Fromville is never meaningless. It appears in underground tunnels, in hidden flows, in places that suggest movement beneath the surface of the town itself. It behaves less like decoration and more like a system. A system that once had direction. A system that once connected places. a system that may have once been an exit. The idea becomes harder to ignore when you consider Dale's destination again. He did not land in a random building. He did not appear in open ground. He appeared inside the structure of the pool itself, as if the pool was not just a place, but a boundary. A boundary that used to be crossable, and now is not. This suggests a possibility that changes the entire interpretation of the town. The pool is not empty because it has been neglected. It is empty because something has been removed from it, something that once allowed passage. If that is true, then the motel sign becomes even more important. It does not point to a motel that no longer exists. It points to a function that no longer operates. The name is gone, but the instruction remains. And Fromville rarely leaves instructions behind without purpose. This is where the theory begins to shift from location-based mystery into system-based logic. The town is not just trapping people inside a physical space. It may be controlling access points, sealing and unsealing routes depending on conditions no one understands. The pool, in this reading, is not a relic. It is a locked mechanism. And Dale did not fall into it by mistake. He arrived at it because it responded to him, which leads to an even more uncomfortable thought. If the pool is a mechanism, then it must have once been active. And if it was active once, then it may not have always been an empty concrete basin. It may have been something far more important. A working passage, a living system, an exit that required conditions no one in the town can currently meet. If the pool is a sealed mechanism, then the next question is unavoidable. What was it before it was sealed? Inside the logic of From, water is never just water. It appears in tunnels beneath the town, in hidden underground streams, and in places that suggest the entire settlement is built over something older and more active than what the surface shows. This is where the idea of the Lake of Tears becomes important, not as folklore, but as function. The Lake of Tears is described like a story element, something symbolic, something almost childish in language. But Fromville constantly hides real mechanisms inside simple, almost storybook framing. The town does not explain itself directly. It encodes. So, if the lake once existed, it likely was not just a body of water.
It was a working system, a point where something changed.
A place where the rules of the town shifted. And that matters when we return to Dale. Because Dale's death only makes sense if the system he entered was still partially active. He did not arrive at a meaningless location. He arrived at a functioning endpoint that no longer had its original structure. Which means the exit was not destroyed. It was altered. A system like this does not simply vanish. It fails in layers. First, the access breaks. Then the flow changes. Then the visible structure disappears, while the underlying mechanism remains buried. This is why the pool feels wrong. It is not just empty. It feels like something has been removed from inside it, not just drained, but deactivated. And in systems like this, deactivation rarely means harmless shutdown. It usually means isolation. Locking something away while leaving the frame intact so nobody notices what is missing. That is what makes Dale's death so revealing. He did not fall into a trap. He arrived at a destination that no longer supported life or passage. The system still responded correctly, but the destination no longer matched the function it was built for. So instead of transition, there was collision. Instead of passage, there was solid matter where there should have been flow. And that leads to the most important implication so far. If the pool was once part of the Lake of Tears system, then it was likely designed for movement, not storage. A place where something passed through rather than stayed inside. Which would explain why it sits beside a motel sign that makes no sense. The sign is not advertising a hotel. It is pointing to a forgotten function of the area. A marker left behind after the system stopped operating correctly. In that sense, Dale's death is not an accident of teleportation. It is a demonstration of a broken interface. A user attempting to exit through a door that no longer opens, but still exists structurally. And Fromville, as always, does not remove broken systems. It leaves them in place. So people keep walking into them. Dale's final moment does not close the mystery, it sharpens it. Inside the world of From, deaths often look like endings, but they behave more like confirmations. Each one reveals how the system reacts when pushed in a certain direction. Dale pushed in the direction of escape, and the system answered. Not with a safe passage, not with guidance, but with exact placement at a point that no longer functioned as intended. That is the most important detail. The destination existed. The coordinates were valid. The delivery worked. Only the outcome failed. That distinction changes everything, because it means the faraway trees are not random at all. They are responsive. They translate intention into location. Dale did not vanish into chaos. He was translated into a destination that matched his strongest directive: escape. And that leads directly back to the idea of the pool as a former exit point. If the system still routes escape intent toward that location, then it suggests something crucial. The exit is still recognized by the system, even if it no longer functions physically. In other words, Fromville still believes the pool is the way out. But something has changed in the real structure of it. Concrete replaced flow. Closure replaced passage. A living mechanism became a dead surface. And that is why Dale's death is not just tragic, it is diagnostic. It shows a mismatch between system logic and physical reality. The logic still directs movement correctly, but the destination no longer supports what it once did. This also reframes every clue connected to water in the town. The underground flows, the hidden tunnels, the recurring presence of moisture beneath structures. All of it begins to look less like atmosphere and more like remnants of a larger system that once connected multiple points across the town. A system that may have allowed transition, healing, or even escape under specific conditions. The Lake of Tears, then, becomes less of a myth and more of a functional label for that system. A name given to something that once had purpose, now reduced to a memory embedded in architecture. And the motel sign beside the pool becomes the final clue that ties it all together. It is not advertising anything. It is marking a coordinate, a reference point left behind after the system stopped behaving as it once did. Dale's death confirms that the coordinate still matters, but the mechanism at that coordinate is broken, or sealed, or hidden beneath layers of reconstruction no one in the town remembers building. Which leads to the final implication: if the system still sends people toward the pool when they try to leave, then the exit has not been removed from the rules of Fromville. It has only been made unreachable in practice. And that means the most dangerous truth of all is still standing in the middle of town, ignored every day by people searching for answers elsewhere. The exit is not gone. It is just no longer usable. Dale's death doesn't just expose a broken structure. It exposes a working intelligence beneath the world of From. Because what happened to him cannot be explained as simple error. It follows a pattern that suggests the town is still operating according to rules no one fully understands. The faraway trees do not behave like random portals. They behave like interpreters. They take intention, convert it into direction, and then deliver a result that matches the internal logic of the system. That is why different people end up in different places even when they enter the same tree at the same time. So when Dale entered with one clear purpose, escape, the system did not hesitate. It did not scatter him. It did not misplace him. It sent him directly to the most relevant endpoint it still recognizes:
The pool.
This implies something deeply unsettling. Fromville still maintains a map of itself. Not a physical map, but a functional one. A memory of where certain outcomes are supposed to happen. And Dale landed on one of those outcomes. But the outcome itself no longer worked. That is why his death feels so precise. Not chaotic. Not accidental. Precise in the worst possible way. It suggests a system that is partially alive. A system that still processes inputs correctly, but no longer guarantees safe outputs. A system that knows where the exit is supposed to be, even if the exit has been physically destroyed or sealed. This is where the idea of the Lake of Tears becomes critical again. If the pool is the remaining surface of something older, then Dale's arrival is not a failure of teleportation. It is a collision with an outdated layer of reality. A layer that still exists in the system's memory, but not in its physical integrity. And that explains why nothing in the town reacts to the pool the way it should. No one treats it like a warning sign. No one investigates it deeply. It sits there, visually present but functionally ignored, like a system prompt everyone has stopped reading. Yet the motel sign refuses to disappear. It continues pointing, even without a motel. It continues marking, even without context. That persistence is important. It suggests that whatever created this structure did not intend for the marker to be removed when the function failed. Instead, it was left behind as a reminder or a trap. Because if Dale is proof of anything, it is that the system still routes escape attempts toward that exact location. Which means anyone who follows that path will eventually reach the same conclusion he did. A destination that exists only as structure, not as function. And that leads to the final realization hidden beneath all of this. Fromville is not just a place where people are trapped. It may be a place where systems are preserved in a degraded state, still operating at partial capacity, still responding to input, still guiding people toward mechanisms that no longer work. Dale did not discover a random death point. He discovered a broken exit that still answers when called. And if that is true, then the most important mystery is no longer how to survive inside Fromville. It is how many other working systems are still quietly responding, waiting for someone else to use them the wrong way. Dale's death leaves behind a conclusion that feels too clean to ignore. Inside the world of From, nothing ever collapses into pure randomness. Even the most violent outcomes tend to reveal structure underneath them. And Dale's case reveals structure more than anything else. Because if the faraway trees still respond to intention, and if the pool still receives escape as a destination, then the system is not broken in the way people assume. It is incomplete, partially functional, operating on old data. That changes the entire meaning of the town. Fromville is not just a prison. It is a preserved mechanism. A place where older systems are still running beneath newer layers of construction, like a machine that has been rebuilt over itself multiple times without ever being fully shut down. The pool becomes the clearest example of this. On the surface, it is nothing, an empty basin next to a meaningless sign. But structurally, it behaves like a coordinate point, a fixed location that still holds significance inside the system's internal logic. Dale's arrival proves that the system still recognizes it, but recognition is not the same as functionality. And that gap is where death happens. The most unsettling implication is that the town does not warn people away from these broken points. It continues to route them toward them, quietly, consistently, without hesitation, as if the system itself is still following instructions written long before the current state of the town existed. This suggests that whatever created Fromville did not anticipate total decay. It expected maintenance,
Continuity.
a functioning loop. But over time, parts of the system stopped matching reality, while the routing logic continued unchanged. So people like Dale become proof of mismatch. Not victims of chaos, but victims of outdated precision. The lake of tears, the motel sign, the empty pool, all of it begins to look less like mystery and more like infrastructure in decline. A network of points that still exist in the system's memory, even though their physical purpose has been erased or buried. And that is why the most important truth in this entire theory is simple. Dale did not find the wrong place. He found the right place at the wrong time in the system's evolution. Which means the exit is not lost. It is misaligned. Still present in the logic of Fromville. Still reachable through the faraway trees. Still waiting at a location that no longer behaves like it used to. And if one attempt already ended in concrete instead of passage, then the real danger is not that the exit is gone. It is that the next person who tries might arrive at a system that is even less intact than before. Because Fromville does not stop functioning. It only stops making sense.